This is how my staff would see me, because I can't read a damn thing anymore unless I have glasses on. And I'm not worried about the way I look in glasses, otherwise I wouldn't show you. But I still prefer not to have them on. But I'm at that point, you know, if I'm in a restaurant and the menu is a little bit dark and darkly lit, I can't even guess what's there. But it's all right, because I've always asked people, tell me, like, what are you guys really good for? That's what I like. That's a terrible industry to be in right now, my goodness, to be trying to survive through that. Anyway, more about me. I think that most people would say I'm extremely argumentative. I'm a very difficult person, but that's just because I like things to be done properly. I'm not promising to do lots of these, but I sometimes feel that I have to speak out, and this is just one of those times. And I thought, you know what, there's so many people who subscribe to my legal newsletter who don't have a clue who I am, or what I used to do, or what the background to the legal newsletter is, that I thought I'd explain a little bit of that. The reality of the matter is, I think, just to change the topic, that this system can be saved, that there's no need for RABs, but there are changes that have to be made to the system. And some of those changes are going to affect some attorneys. But do any of you really think that it's a good use of public money for a case to be settled for past meds for 30,000 and the plaintiff attorney gets paid 50 or 60,000 in party and party costs, and the defendant attorney gets a similar amount? Would any of you like to go on carte blanche and say that for 30,000 less a fee to be refunded to a service provider, that the system had to pay out 130,000? Would any of you like to explain that? I would decline that position, right? I think anybody with a brain would decline to go on carte blanche to explain a story like that. Well, then let's accept that it's wrong. That is not what we should be doing. The money is for the victims. It cannot be to get a 3,000 Rand claim for an ambulance and then for two parties to run up the cost. Sure, you can blame the Road Accident Fund, because don't misquote me. Of course, that's where it starts. They could have made their offer in 120 days. I understand that. But the fact that they didn't, should we allow them to be taken advantage of? Is the court system there for that type of cost? I don't think so. And it shouldn't be used for that. And you know what? If we stamp out that type of thing, if we stamp out the smaller claims, and some people aren't going to like it, and it's going to cost them money, and it's going to probably put them out of business. But you could still get the service provider getting paid their money, and maybe it'll take a year or two longer, but it won't bankrupt the system. Because what has been going on is unacceptable, and it has to change. And that's just me. I'm direct. I'm honest, but any one of you watching this knows that it's not right. And therein lies the second problem with attorneys. If I put out my newsletter to 1,200 people, I'll get about 35 replies to the average survey. Maybe this video will get 300. Maybe somebody will say he said something shocking, and it'll get a lot more. But attorneys in South Africa are so apathetic. They aren't in other countries. In America, attorneys, plaintiff injury attorneys, donate heavily to the Democratic Party because it's the Republican Party that puts them out of business in states like Texas. They get involved. They don't say, it's the ANC, I wouldn't deal with it. It's a wrong approach. It's not the right approach. Who is the leading party in our country? Is it the Democratic Alliance? Or is it the ANC? Why are we not talking to the ANC? Why are we not coming up with proposals that can save this system? Not with just slamming the door shut on RABs. And RABs is unacceptable. And it isn't going to succeed in its current form. And it can't. But let's come with some solutions. Let's help out. Send in the ideas. Send them to me. I'll pass them on. Let's get down to drafting some draft legislation. Let's come up with some interim ideas to save the Road Accident Fund, because it needs to be saved. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the man in the street who suffers a serious injury. Do they deserve to get their 4,000 Rand a month in terms of RABs, payable monthly if you're alive, and the same amount if you die to your kids and your family and everybody else. No, it's nonsense, okay? And Zapiro did the cartoon about the hyena, and I bought the original of that cartoon and have it displayed in my offices. Beautiful cartoon. I don't like it when attorneys are described in that way. But what is happening in the smaller cases now? The abuse that is going on. That's where we get that title from. And it's got to stop. Back to the apathy. Attorneys don't do anything, okay? And it'd be easy to say, well, that's your legal newsletter, Michael. No, I was a chairperson of the Johannesburg Attorneys Association. No, I was a chairperson of the Gauteng Law Council. No, I sat on the Law Society for 10 years. How do we get people even to the Law Society annual general meeting? They came up with a trick that they would give certificates to people who'd been in service for 40 years. And then we ran out of them, so eventually we lowered to 25 years, okay? And gave people certificates. Half of those people leave the meeting after they get their certificate. What fraction of the Johannesburg Attorneys Association members turns up at the AGM? Attorneys are apathetic. They don't do anything. And they always say, what's the point of doing anything, because nothing will happen? No, people, nothing's happening because none of you are trying, other than to write letters saying, hey, Michael, you were really good at this. I think you should get involved because I think you could save the road accident fund for us. If every attorney in the country that did this work put in, let's say, 5,000 Rand a month, and some guys like me can put in more, and I'm not even near the top of the list as to who the really big firms are that do this work, and I've published them in my newsletter before. You know how much we could do. The adverts we could run, the advocates we could call in to help draft legislation, to help motivate things, the packages we could put together towards ANC members. Why is nobody going to these ANC conferences where people pay 50,000 Rand for a table? Why are they not going? That is how politics works in every country in the world. In fact, in South Africa, the politicians get less money from the companies than probably any advanced country in the world. What's the problem of going along and trying to have our word heard by the party that is in power? Talk to the DA, by all means. It's nice to talk to them. They're not going to win in the next 50 years, so don't even worry about them. You know, chat. I'm sure they help. They have their ways. They all walked out of Parliament. That was great. Let's get the ANC on side. Let's let them see the good parts of this system and that it can be saved and it can work for the victims, and we can get rid of the incompetence, largely on the side of the Road Accident Fund, and the abuse, largely on the side of plaintiff attorneys who take advantage of the incompetence of the Road Accident Fund in smaller cases that should never, ever be litigated. One of the issues I wanted to discuss is my thoughts on the current situation in which we find ourselves. And I think people don't realize how desperate it is. We've got about 20 firms that are currently issuing writs and really trying to put themselves in front of everybody else. That's absolutely uncollegial. It's unacceptable. And it puts the whole system at risk, because if we all do the same thing, can you imagine what is going to happen and what would happen to the entire system? There isn't enough money to deal with all the writs that could be issued. There simply isn't. There's no ways that we can behave like that and be cavalier. And I know that people have some real problems, okay? And I've discussed it with the Road Accident Fund, and one of the things, and I'll deal with that in my newsletter as well, is that there's a black hole that exists, and that's their word, not mine, between when a case is settled and what the finance department are seeing as owed. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that there are people in your office that are phoning night and day and emailing night and day, and I have dedicated staff that just do this. That's all they do. They just do this to get their matters loaded. And once you're loaded, then you were looking at 6 months before. I would imagine with the current finances that we're probably looking at 8 or 9 months unless there's a capital injection. Realistically speaking, for a case that's settled tomorrow, okay? That's what I think. But I'll be happy to be proven wrong, and I'd love a capital injection from the government to be made. That would be fantastic. But you've got to get those claims loaded up by the fund. And if you're just doing one letter to the fund and one letter to the other attorneys, and then sitting and saying, I have to issue writ because they're not responding, that's where the problem is, okay? Should you have to do those things? No. Should you know to do those things when you're dealing with an organization that has so many problems? Yes, you should know that. If you didn't know it, you know it now. So get cracking on that. There's so many firms I find that are under-resourced. There's guys that seem to have dozens of matters on the court roll every day, but only 2 or 3 attorneys at court and advocates running everywhere. I don't stand for that kind of practice. I don't believe in that type of stuff. Actually, we refer away quite a bit of our cases. We only take on about 5 or 6 cases a week. Yes, I prefer to focus on quality. I'm not sending an attorney to court with 4 cases and 4 different advocates to manage and that sort of thing. It's just not professional. I'm quite sure it's probably unethical as well in a number of respects, including the attorney who's getting instructed. But a number of people are under-resourced. Get enough resources. It could be that's why you're not getting payment, because either you haven't targeted where the problem is or you're under-resourced.